Psychotechnologies live! Woo! Welcome to a very special episode of Psychotechnologies live.
Is every episode special? Like, is that a thing?
Yeah, because we're present and we're with the episode, and
right. This episode
Psychotechnologies live! Woo! Welcome to a very special episode. That's coming from you, right?
Yeah, it's coming from me. Amazing. Apologies. Fascinating. Hearing yourself on the loop.
Yeah, because like we're spending life energy.
Right, and life should be special.
Life is special. It should be. It is.
Well, as in, like, we make it special by caring about it. That's what I mean by should be special.
Well, it is special, and you could recognize that and stick with it and experience it, or you can disregard it and ruin it and throw it away. It's your choice.
It is amazing how resilient life is, both in the ability to be drastically meaningful and also the ability to handle being entirely meaningless moment by moment, that can change.
Yeah, definitely the experience, I think, of life changes throughout life. But life is precious. I think if you don't recognize that, if you don't act like that, like it's not going to turn out well.
Right. I would say that it's not better if you make it not special. Like, it's not better to treat it as no big deal, or like it's not special. It's not always better if you treat it like too much of a big deal either, but there's like it's kind of better if you care.
You're saying this like as if like it's coming from a perspective like there's choice, like, oh, I can make it special, I can care, I can, versus sort of recognizing it for what it is. You know what I mean?
Say more. Drinking your coffee.
Like if you had a diamond, that would be special to you. Or like you had a diamond that was given to you by, and then there's like some story, like an ex-girlfriend before she died, or your father's last dying breath gave you this family animal that was in your generation, in your family for 18 generations. Like that would be special.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't need to make it special. You wouldn't need to do anything. It would just, it itself would have significance, and you would, maybe you wouldn't recognize, like maybe you would recognize it, maybe you wouldn't, but you wouldn't need to make it significant. It already is significant. And I think like life is like that, but like way more, like on steroids, right? Like life has been in your generation in your family for generations, and it's passed on, mother to daughter.
Interestingly, like the religious philosophies often point at Judaism does it with the like, we are the chosen peoples. Mm-hmm. You are special because you are the chosen peoples. You have a unique quality yourself from divine.
Well, it's interesting. We were taught that the chosen people, it's not that God chose us, it's that we chose God.
Right.
And like after God, in our tradition, after God took the Jews out of Egypt, he offered the Torah to all the other nations first, and they all rejected it. Mm-hmm. And then the Jews accepted it.
Right, but we also have the birthright. You have a birthright, comes from Abraham. That God promised to Abraham, his children will be as numerous as the stars in the sand.
Yeah. But that ritual that's revitalized every generation. Right? Like that's passed on father to son.
Right.
Through the circumcision. Through the bristle, actually what it is. Circumcision is just part of that.
Right, but so the proposal is that through your genes you are special. Through your ancestry you are special.
Through the covenant with God,
made
and that
with,
covenant is passed on. It's not genetic, because like
right, because they
someone
didn't know about genetics back then, but the covenant made with your ancestors passes down the generations to make you a special.
yeah, that's that covenant is passed on,
You have the generation.
right? Like I passed it on to him. You know, and it's his. Right now, it's my job to, you know, to teach him and to pass that on to him. But then he gets to a certain age, when he becomes bar mitzvah, so 13, then he gets, like, then he's responsible for the covenant.
I suspect other religions do this too. They they endow their constituents with a heavenly soul. Buddhism doesn't do souls, or it does different, but Christianity does a soul. I should know better. I'm limited in my knowledge.
Well, that's like Christianity. I think it's like Jesus died for your sins, and
right. That's a different covenant. Interesting.
But each generation has to accept Jesus into their
right, and then renew the covenant.
Yeah. So whether that's done as a baby, like in the baptismal water, or whether that's done as an adult, like or older person, when they receive the spirit of like the Holy Ghost or the Spirit of Christ or whatever. You know, that depends on, like, I guess which religious sect you're part of and stuff. But I mean, it's still passed on, because I think like there's this aspect of religion, like there's genetics and race and whatever and all that, but this religion isn't that. Religion is spiritual. It's a spirit that's passed on. I think that's what makes it different versus like something like a white supremacist or whatever, like you know, it's not genetics that's valued the most. It's you know, like Judaism or Christianity, or like whatever, it's those things, or yoga, like the yogic traditions.
Well, yogic traditions have a lineage.
Yeah. Yeah, they do it differently than the Abrahamic faiths. But yeah, they still have the traditions. And they still pass it on. There's still rituals and ways and things they're allowed to pass on to certain people. Like Judaism doesn't have it that much, but like there are lots of things where I'm like, I wouldn't share this with someone outside the faith.
Well, these days, pretty much everything is written down in books, and so people from outside various faiths can read the books and gather.
You can't really understand them. Like if you didn't grow up in like, it's like like this war, like Putin is trying to understand West, or we're trying to understand Putin. Like it's like the mindset or the paradigm is so, or like the culture, the way of living, like whatever you want to call it, it's so different that you won't, like the words don't mean anything. Like the words don't mean anything if you don't have that life experience. And so like someone can go through Judaism and read all this stuff, and I do like sometimes talk about it with non-Jews, where I'll say things and then like their responses, I'm like, oh, what? Like, how do you have this response? And I'm like, oh, because they don't have these years of living inside the tradition.
Look, I have problems.
Hmm?
Actually, this is a tricky one. I both understand everyone really well, and also like other minds are so foreign to me in the way that they work. So I kind of get both sides of this thing. I consider myself like a good translator. If someone's trying to say something, I can get what they mean very easily, and I can also speak in their language so that they understand fairly easily. And yet I still, despite having good translation abilities map to map, I still often am like, how and why does this person work in this way?
Yeah. Yeah, it's like the difference between understanding what someone's saying versus like being able to predict what they're going to say. And like to really understand, when you really understand someone, you don't understand what they're saying. They don't need to tell you. You just get it. Or you're like synchronized. And like to me, that's like that's like the spirituality, like that ineffability where it's like Judaism has this all the time, where during like the prayers they'll be synced, like people will say the same things at the same time, and nobody's telling you to do that. You just do it because that's what you do. And even if something like unique happens, it's like two Jews, three opinions, but there's like within a certain context or framework, or like a certain kind of response, or even if not, you're not having the same response as someone else, like you get where they're coming from. And like maybe you disagree, but you're in the same, like you're in the same place, like you're in the same tradition, you're in the same way of being, even if you disagree. It's not just mutual respect, though. That's needed as well. It's you're part of something bigger than yourselves, and you're all reacting to things, to like the universe, or part of the universe that's outside you. And so that kind of acts like the conductor almost, so that you can all, like an orchestra, like not everybody's playing the same note all the time. Like they could be completely different things, but there's still a synchronicity between them.
I guess, yeah, I'm bringing to mind various different reasons that humans synchronize. So we can like sing a choir together, or we can play a sport together, or we can, there's like synchronized dance or diving. Well, there's like singing a national anthem. It's something we do, a lot of people will do together. There's not actually that many things we will do in synchronized fashion.
Yeah. That kind of occurred to me as well. Like, I think that's a big part of like getting people on the same page. It's being able to, like, having people like synchronized in some way, and that doesn't necessarily mean copying them, but
yeah, everyone yawns.
Right, like synchronized swimming, they're all copying each other, just at like maybe different degrees. But if you're like working on a project together, they're like army, right? Like the army works together well, right? You have like a tank, it functions as a singular tank, function as a bunch of individuals.
Right, working together is not synchronizing necessarily. It's working together, doing different things, supporting the same goal.
Yeah.
But synchronizing is a little bit less common than that.
Yeah, and those are various ways. Like I think like army does this well, where like they can have, like they do like marching in step, but then they also do things like, like tank drills, right? Where like one person's loading the ammo, one person's, driving, one person's moving the turret around, whatever, radioing.
Yep.
I don't know how tanks work. Like they're all they're a single unit. And then and like let's say the commander on the battlefield is going to be like okay, you tanks go here. They're not going to like go here and open fire or something, right? Like they're not going to say okay, you go and drive and you go and load and you go, right? Like they're the people inside know that they're one.
Mm.
And I think this is a big part of like the political divide, like the culture war that we're having now. It's like we're not synchronized with each other.
More synchronized diving. Got it. Daniel solves the political problem. More.
I didn't solve it. I pointed out an aspect of it that needs to be worked on.
Well, I do wonder what would happen if we tried to synchronize people more often. I have I run a bunch of groups. They're currently sort of on Zoom because of Corona reasons online. And there's this one group I run that at the start of Corona, we had this conversation about generating a group practice that can sort of bring us close together, despite the fact that we're through screens and we're very far away. And we settled on this what we call a breathing practice, which is we go around. There's usually like on the order of like 5 to 10 people, and each person leads take a deep breath in and breathe out, and then passes to another person, and then the whole group does this little like breathing together practice. And the idea was that like if you just noticing how different people conduct the little like the leadership moment of like take a deep breath in and now breathe out is a measure of different people's personality, and a measure of how people are feeling today, and a measure of connection building and synchronization. And then we go into the topic and the conversation after that. But it's quite a nice little practice. Just, breathing together, paying attention to how other people are feeling. Otherwise, we're all in our little postage stamps on screen, and it's hard
There's
to
like this like deep, like fundamental like synchronization
right
with each other.
We tried not to get too like concrete into the exactly why we're doing it or what we're doing, but potentially there's a nervous system alignment or a like patterning of thinking together or being together in that way.
Mm-hmm.
We try not to make it too big a deal of it, and we just do it, and then we get into our conversation. But I think it does have deeper effects than we give it credit for.
Mm-hmm.
I think I would continue it in person if I go in person.
Yeah, it's really
it's like micro spirituality.
Sorry?
It's a micro spirituality.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's spirituality. Yeah, I don't really need the micro,
but it's not like big, long, complex. It's just a couple of breaths together.
Yeah, it's like small, but that stuff adds up.
Yeah. I think it makes a good tone for the following conversation. But like it's a group discussion sort of format. And it just means that people are present and people listen and people are reflective. And for me, as often the host, it gives me a sense of where that person is at. Like if they're rushing through the breath thing, or if they are relaxed, or if they're nervous, or if they're just like doing the listening to them say.
You have to feel comfortable probably in leadership, or if they want the spotlight off them.
Yeah, breathe in, breathe out. That person isn't really keen on like occupying center stage. Whereas other people are like, everybody together now, breathe in. I'm performative, I'm like loud, I'm engaged. It's a good little process.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like the thing that's coming up for me now is like the pronouns and land acknowledgements.
Mhm. Oh,
Um,
there are land acknowledgements in other countries.
yeah, we
Oh,
got
really?
that here in Canada. And I think the US does that sometimes too.
Ah, interesting. So it happens here in Australia sometimes.
Yeah.
It anyway, yes. I didn't realize that other countries had it. I like following
Oh,
some political and social stuff in Australia, it became more common to do them, but I didn't realize other countries
yeah.
had
It's the same
regular
thing.
acknowledgement of the land.
It's the same thing here. Like the details are different because like I don't think
Yeah,
like
because
here,
it's
like,
legal, political, all the rest. But
yeah, different tribes and different specific atrocities that were committed. Um, but there's yeah, like I'm like I wonder how much of that is more to like synchronize everybody and get them all on the same page and the same perspective.
I think that as a society, we have a long way to go before those acknowledgement of land processes really connect.
Yeah,
I'm a little bit token right now.
it's divisive,
Hmm.
I think as well. Yeah, it's either token or divisive. Like it's either like okay, I guess I'll just do this,
Hmm.
or it's like no, there's this thing, and then you have to do it, or you're a bad person. Which very much reminds me of prayers.
Right, like forced prayer when you're a little kid in a religious system. They're like, now
Yeah,
pray. Okay, good. Let's move on.
yeah. Like when I grew up, it was like very much like that. Like, oh, you have to do this thing, or you're a bad person. And I mean, now I find the prayer interesting. Like when I go to my Christian friend's house and they do grace, I actually enjoy that because it's very like very like new and novel, and like what's going on here, and spirituality stuff, which I genuinely like now.
Hmm. Like, I think I want to speak to the way the acknowledgement of land ceremony, what it's meant to do, right? Like if I were really trying to integrate the tribal roots of the ownership of territory that we have built our society on, I would be like the like from a psychotech perspective, right? I want to take that layer of our history and I want to connect through it and be respectful of the past, right? Ideally, practically speaking, like we said, it gets very tokeny, but I want to be like, oh yeah, there was a lot of there was once a society underneath our current society that lived in more of a natural relationship with the environment, and we have built our society on top of them, and quite literally and metaphorically. Hmm.
Like maybe, like I would be open to that. It's just like it's extremely political, like the way they do it.
Right. That's not the way that I sort of described it. There is not what happens, right? You say
Yeah,
the magical sentence of we acknowledge the land and the owners and the this and the that, and then we like go silent for a moment, and then we're like, all right, on with the show. It's like did you ever have you ever seen the movie The Emperor's New Groove? Oh,
yes.
so right in the beginning of the movie, the evil Yzma turns the emperor into a llama, and then kidnaps him and like takes him away to a village or whatever,
Yeah,
to hide it. And then no one can find the emperor. She says he's dead, and they have like this big funeral thing for the emperor. And then because it's a kids movie, it's sort of a cartoon, and then they're having this like, oh, how he was so young, and then like sort of the ceremony ends, and then she says the phrase, well, he ain't getting any dinner. And then back to work. And then they recolor code the entire society from like the emperor's colors, which were red and blue, to her colors, which was evil purple, and they're like, the cloths get changed, and they rebuild the palace, and in a like cinematographic like Disney style of like, but the line, we just did the acknowledgement of land ceremony, and then we're like, well, he ain't getting any dinner, and we're on with the show, right?
Yeah,
it seems a little disrespectful.
There's something about that that's like dismissive or whatever, but
obviously when we do the land, we're not that bad to say he ain't getting any dinner, but that's sort of how we go, right? We acknowledge the land and then we move on, which is not what I'd like to see. I'd like a healthier integration.
But like, I don't know, you can't do that every meeting. Like you can't live your life like that.
I don't want to forever be looking.
You can, but then you wind up looking very Jewish. Like every time you do anything, you need to do blessings and acknowledgements, and like your life becomes very ritual heavy.
Right. So that's also not ideal. I don't want a world in which we're constantly harking back to the past, to the people that,
Yeah, like the Jews are constantly lamenting about like the destruction of the temple.
Yeah. Well, people are still pissed off at the destruction of the Library of Alexandria. That'll be another couple of hundred.
But not like Jews are. Like Jews do this all the time. Like
yes.
we spend months in like mourning every year.
Yes, it does seem like there's something like spiritual bloat. Like there's a thing where
yeah, it's like a ritual, or like it's more the rituals and stuff more than the like.
There's this thing where Judaism stopped making festivals. It was like a couple hundred years ago. They were like, okay, no more festivals, because they were just,
no more new ones.
They tried to kill us. We lived. Let's celebrate. We do that many times a year, and no more new ones. Yes.
Yeah, they don't do like the new ones, but it's they don't really like, because all the ones that kind of exist are like existential threats to Judaism.
Right, but so was the Holocaust.
So the Holocaust does have its own day, Yom HaShoah.
Right, but it's not in the religion at the same quality as the biblical festivities.
Yeah, but there is a
but it's not at the same level.
Like Tisha B'Av, so this destruction of the Second Temple, or sorry, Tisha B'Av, I should say, is a day of like mourning where we like lament all the like the terrible things that have happened. And there's the reason why it's that day is because there's like actually a bunch of things that happened on that day at various time periods. Destruction of the Second Temple is like the main one, but or like the siege. I can't remember exactly what it was, because that took place over years. But the Holocaust is often, depending on which sect, but it is often added to the prayers.
Yes.
And then the State of Israel is also, depending on which sect again you're part of. The one I was a part of, like they used to do a prayer for the State of Israel every Sabbath.
Heard that one, but it's not they didn't fundamentally invent a new holiday, change the structure of the major festivities. There is a day of significance, but they didn't. They always admit they've added it on. They're not saying like this belongs in the original canon. It's like
it doesn't have the same weight.
It's like how Christmas in Christianity is Christmas and Easter, adding another one, right? That would be weird.
Yeah, but then again, it's the same thing. Like Holocaust wasn't actually technically existential threat to Judaism, because there were Jews in America, there were Jews in like lots of other parts of the world that weren't. Right,
whereas the Egypt story was.
Versus like all the Jews were in Egypt, yeah. And Hanukkah, all the Jews were in Israel at the time.
Right.
So that would have been.
Yes, interesting.
Yeah, but it is like, if someone were to remake it today, I think the weight that's placed would be rebalanced. but it's hard. Like you can't really rebalance it because for lots of reasons. But
well, there's a good question here of balancing the past, present, and future, right? So from a psychotech lens, some of your time and energy should be put towards reflecting on the past, honoring what has happened. Some of your time and energy should be put towards building a present, and some of your time and energy should be put towards planning towards a future.
Yeah.
So, and obviously the past has different lengths of how far, like, last year or like the last generation or like even biblically, like they're different time scales of the past.
Yeah, Judaism has that as well. Where you have like Yom Kippur, let's say, is like the last year.
Right.
For the last year. Right.
But there's the global question here of how much time should you be spending on the past or on the future or on the the day-to-day present.
Yeah, that's a good question.
And obviously we're saying that if in every meeting across every country and everywhere we were to acknowledge the tribal peoples, it would feel like a bit much.
Yeah, and also like it's not like there's a very specific like political agenda behind that, right? Because like I don't recognize, like we've never recognized Canada or Australia except like in like specific situations. As in, like, we've never started this and saying, "Oh, I'm acknowledging that." Oh,
right. In our conversations here, we have never named the land in which. Well, the interesting thing about land is that the internet is a digital. It doesn't have land. Like it travels on the land, in the land, through the land, kind of like over the land. Yeah, but we've never acknowledged. It's kind of nice that the virtual space has never had a war in it, such that people died over the territory of the internet. In like the way that like you can die on a property, physical land space, someone can shove a spear through you. You can't die in the virtual space, and so the internet is neutral turf in some way. Kind of.
Yeah, no, like no one's died. Like I want to acknowledge that. Like no one's died on the internet, I think.
Right. Like you can't be stabbed over the internet and then cause your death. You can probably like have the internet obviously does impact us, and probably eventually there'll be a way to cause great enough harm to someone through their computing system. But right now,
yeah, and there are sanctions which I guess like you can kind of do over the internet. Right. And there are like China's got its own internet. North Korea doesn't have internet. Russia is a thing.
Right. And these are all complicated, but fundamentally the way that the land could have had bloodshed on it is not the same in which the internet could have had bloodshed over the internet in the same way.
Yeah.
Like the internet's very much a less tangible surface.
But probably people have died, like setting up the internet or something.
Oh yeah, I'm sure. And like maintaining the bits of the internet, but it's not the same. It's like saying like when you were sweeping your house, you could have died. And therefore you died in the house or about the house.
Has there never been an accident? Like, because then they lay down there.
Right, but that's died about the house, right? Whereas if someone came and murdered you in that, or like you fought a war to protect your house, I would be treating that differently than if you were sweeping the house and you fell over.
There have been like culture wars and stuff.
Right.
Like Opa and Pipa, everything. Like there's been a history of
could have resulted in death, but we're not quite treating it as like died on the surface.
Yeah.
There's no like, you know,
it's not the same. Yeah.
So here, sometimes when you get car accidents by the side of the road, people put a little like a memorial wreath of flowers, and they come back and they bring flowers. Where would you put the little flowers? Where would you put the wreath if it was
they do on Facebook, they'll like whenever there's like a thing that's going on, people change the profile picture.
Yes,
I think there was like a black box.
Google does change for various different.
Yeah, and Google changes, like you can change icons.
So you do have a point that sometimes we do, but there's no like fixture that we can change. I guess we could like change the number of letters in the word Google or something to like permanently, but like it's not like you can build a war memorial statue in the park near my house and then it like stays there. You can't do that on the internet because the shape of the internet sort of keeps changing a bit for now anyway.
Yeah, they're much more temporal in nature instead of like permanent.
Yes.
But
so
that's still a thing. But like even the land acknowledgements itself is a temporal, where you're saying it and then you're not saying it.
Well, it's part of the structure of the meeting.
And we have I don't know if you have this in Australia, but we have a Remembrance Day in Canada. I don't even know if the States does it. So that's like when the Canadian soldiers, World War II, or it's really all the wars, I think. But it kind of started around World War II, and we were at the poppies.
We have a day. It's called the Anzac Day, which is Australian and New Zealand. Anzac AC. It was for World War One, but obviously then starts to incorporate.
Oh, maybe it was World War One.
Anzac.
For me, it's like World War II because like my grandfather was in World War II. So like when I always think
right.
of World War II.
Anzac, Australian and New Zealand Army Corps, and so it's coming up in a couple of weeks from now, and that's the day in which the poppies are used to commemorate, and it also includes other wars now, but yeah. Served and died in all wars, conflicts, and peacekeeping operations.
Yeah. So we have that equivalent here.
Yeah.
And like that's very temporal, and there's like a moment of silence.
Right. So there's one day a year that is done.
Yeah, and you do a minute. I think it's a minute or two silence.
Yeah.
We're just like wherever you are, like we used to do in school, and like our school didn't do like non-Jewish holidays, but they actually did this one.
Well, Judaism tends to take on the traditions of the land that it is occupying. So
like if they like it, so like.
Well, you
like,
take the laws of the land.
In Canada, they liked that like what the soldiers did, right? Because that was like a very, very big thing. So it's like that's kind of getting incorporated. But like Christmas won't, Easter won't.
Mm-hmm.
So historically, it's been not good for the Jews. So we don't celebrate Christmas at all, Easter. Like the religious people won't do New Year's. And
yes.
Yeah. I forgot what that thread was.
Right. So there's Yom Kippur, which is a Jewish atonement for the last year sort of day. And then there is these 1 days a year that we reflect on our local national contribution and suffering in wars. There's a bunch of those, depending on which country you're in. So that's like, how much time are we spending really reflecting on the past? So those are two instances. So the religion one, there's the societal one.
So the religious ones, like all the holidays they're all past stuff, but they're also usually like ideas that you're wanting to sit with, and like rituals that you do like in that moment, in that day, or during that day.
That's interesting. Many of the religion things don't really point towards the future. Many of the religion traditions don't really point towards the future. There is some sort of like end of days, coming of Messiah sort of good thing will happen in the future, but we don't have a festival for that.
Passover kind of is.
So it gets talked about on festive occasions, that may we move closer to the Messianic era.
Yeah, so Passover is we do the 4 cups of wine. It's like part of the ritual, and each of those have a word associated with redemption. And so there's 4 cups that were used, or 4 words that were used when the Jews were redeemed from Egypt. And then there's a 5th word that's used for like the future, for when like the end of days. And so there's also a 5th cup during the Passover Seder, Seder, which is like the ritual dinner, I guess.
Order.
Yeah, it technically means order, but I don't know how to explain it.
The order of the meal of the festival is rigid in structure.
Yeah.
Sequential.
And so there's a 5th one that's not drink, that's given to Elijah the prophet, which is pretty much Jewish Santa Claus.
I'm like, I know what you mean, and also I'm like, try not to confuse people. You're at the wrong time of year to make that analogy. Why does your Santa Claus come around at Easter? You know, like kind of.
Well, different calendars.
That's not why. That's okay. That's not an explanatory power explanation. That's some words. Yes, I think what you said was true, but it's not words with explanatory power.
Yeah. It's not really Santa Claus, but there's similarities, so we joke about it.
Sure.
And so like that one's not drinking. That one's just there as like a ritual wine.
It's like the cookies and milk thing.
Yeah. No, it's exactly like that, because we do that and then we have the wine, and then so what we would do at my house is we would send my brother, because you go open the door for him, like as part of the ritual. And so I would send my youngest brother to go open the door, and then while he's away from the table, we drink it. It'd be like, oh my God, he drank it, look. But we used to do this when he was like a teenager. Like
guys.
And like he obviously knows, but like we just like, I don't know, it's funny.
So part of this
he's like, who was drinking? And we're like, no, we didn't.
To explain the ritual, you pour this cup of wine, sort of sits in my house, it sat in the middle of the table, and then send someone to go open the door, and then part of it is everyone stands up, right, to like welcome the
to greet him,
guest who drops by the house, sort of thing. And obviously the process of everyone standing up often shakes the table and wobbles the glass, and then that moment is when they're like, look, he's drinking in my house.
Yeah. Because you built the top.
Look, and it's moving.
Yeah.
Yes.
I heard some people had like one of those cups that they could like secretly get rid of some of the liquid.
Magic tricks.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, it's good times.
Yeah, it's this is the joy of the silliness of religion. There was, oh man, I read an excerpt from like an anthropologist who was studying a particular native culture that was sacrificing to their gods or whatever. And like, you know, we talk about this tradition where the like you open the door and you invite in the spirit and blah blah blah, the person, and then we talk, me and you were talking about the little silly bit in the middle where you laugh about like maybe the cup is, you know that he's not actually coming in the door, and you're laughing about like you shake the table and the thing spills and you laugh at it. And this anthropologist was talking about something like they had this very serious ritual where they called the spirits of the whatever to like help them on their hunt. And then they did a silly thing like that where they made fun of the spirit, and it was like this information could have like shattered my entire thesis if I had included it, because they also had some self-awareness and were making jokes about the stupid ritual that they were doing.
Yeah.
And they said that the spirits also like the jokes.
Yeah. I remember reading that. I can't remember where it's from. But I remember reading the article, and like that's so true. Like that's so like what the rituals are like.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Like our ritual has this like pour the cup of wine for the spirit, the person who will come visit, open the door for them, stand up, and like make a couple jokes about it.
Yeah.
It's like that's our thing, and across many generations we have done that.
Yeah, you know what? Like in for Rosh Hashanah, like the Jewish New Year, the jokes are actually passed along through generations. So like you get certain foods because in Hebrew or in Yiddish,
Puns.
they're puns.
So Sweet New Year is the classic one.
Yeah, so you get honey, so you can have a sweet New Year. The head of the fish, so you should be like the head of the fish, not the tail.
Right. So
Like isn't really
the head of the year or something.
Yeah, it's like symbolic, right? Yeah. And so people would get lettuce and raisins. So you can let us have a raise.
Oh, that's so funny because I always heard of it as celery and raisins.
Oh,
So you could have a raisin salary.
yeah, lettuce, raisin, celery. I know there's another one.
Ah,
Let us have a raisin salary.
I had never heard the lettuce part, but that's great.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, and so people just like make these jokes, but like it's serious. Like it's actually serious. Like you have to go out and do it. Like it's not a joke, but like it's a joke, but it's like a serious joke.
Well, now I'm wondering if like Buddhism has these like haha but serious traditions too.
I think I'm not familiar so much with the Buddhist traditions, but
I think Zen would love jokes, making jokes of itself. I just don't know of any.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the Buddhist rituals. I'm much more just familiar with like the meditations and things like that. But yeah, like koans and stuff, like the sound of one-handed clap, or whatever. Like those are jokes.
Often jokes, yes. Or often having a joking side to them.
Yeah, and like it's just like most of their stuff is just a joke, but it's like if you get it, then you're like it's hard to get it. But when you get it, it like brings wisdom and understanding. And I think, yeah, like that's true also for this. Like when you're doing these jokes, like you become part of the tradition, you become part of the faith. For Jews, it's much more like asking questions. So like again, like the Passover Seder, which is like one of the big holidays, is like the whole thing is designed to ask questions, or it's like designed to ask questions and then answer them, or not even necessarily answer them, but to ask them. And like all the things that are done, like they're done in these weird ways so that the children will ask questions. And then there's even a part where the children ask the ritual questions, and then that sort of starts off the story. They're like, why are we doing all this stuff? That's a great question, because when our forefathers were slaves in Egypt, and then like the whole story starts.
We really do know how to hold a grudge. Egypt was what, like a couple thousand years ago, in theory.
This is what it means to be like an indigenous tribe. Like you hold on to these things.
Well, it's also difficult because we were a scholarship, like Judaism has some scholarship in there. So they wrote stuff down and they like taught everyone to read and write. And so you can hold a grudge much easier over many generations when you write stuff down.
Yeah. Like there's still in Judaism, it's there's still like one of the mitzvahs is to destroy a Amalek, which is like a nation. But I don't think it exists anymore. But like there's like a ritual, like it's like part of the commandment to kill these people when you see them.
What a grudge. Can you imagine having a grudge so hard that you created a religion around it just to be like mad at it?
It's part of religion. This is like whatever. This is like probably like 3,000 years old at this point.
Yeah.
Like this grudge. And like those people don't even exist, and it's still part of the tradition. And then it gets like, well, what does it mean? It means like this, and then you sort of like get into like the more spiritual qualities side of things. But yeah, because they attacked us when we were weak.
Well, it was something like pure evil, and so therefore you should stamp out evil anytime you find it,
Yeah,
sort of broadly.
yeah. But you usually don't, like, it's only for this specific tribe. Like, you don't, in general, like, there's no, there's certain like grudges where like certain, from certain tribes, people can't marry like the priest class, things like that. But
all that has been lost as well.
well, the thing is, in our tradition, there was a guy, I forgot who it was. I think it might have been one of the Persian kings, where he came in and he moved everyone around. Or maybe it was a Babylonian one, I can't remember. And so traditionally, like when we say like there's like Egyptians or certain like have certain things, because when we were in Egypt, they didn't treat us nicely. But the people that live in modern day Egypt are not considered those kind of Egyptians.
Right.
Because like everything got moved around. And like the traditions of the people have been lost. So they're not really, like they're not, like those people don't, like the people with grudges against don't exist anymore.
Right.
So it's kind of, I think it's kind of a moot point.
Well, so I still have this open question of like, how much time should you spend looking to the past, and how much time should you even spend looking to the future, and separate from time spent being present?
Yeah,
I don't even know how to work that out as a, what is the, like the answer to that question may be dynamic as well.
Yeah, I think there's an aspect of like, I don't think you necessarily want to isolate so much. So there's like isolating, like just looking at the past. But like when you do these things, you're looking at the past. You're not looking at the past, like you're looking at the past, but you're looking at the patterns that existed within the past. And those patterns
could exist today.
Yeah, like you learn history because those who don't learn history are doomed to repeat it. Right. So when you're learning history, are you learning, is this the past or is this the present? Or is this the future? And the answer is like, that's not a good framework. Like these are all, like you're learning how the world works.
Right.
And maybe you're spending a bunch of time in the past. Maybe you're even spending time in like imagination, right? Like I learned a lot of history from, I used to play like Crusader Kings and European Universalis, which are video games, and those aren't even real, but the mechanics of them, like learning the mechanics, like learning the mechanics of the history of how history works. When you learn that, like you also learn mechanics of how the present works. And it's not one-to-one and all that stuff, but there is an aspect of how things, like how do things work.
I would say something like
past data.
Consciousness has similarity to itself everywhere. So if you look at the way the consciousness played out in the past, you'll find how consciousness is playing out in the present as well.
Yeah.
And same to looking towards the future.
Yeah. Because your past is all your data. Sorry, it's not all your data. Like your past is all like data, and then like the present is all like experiments.
And the future is all prediction.
And the future is the thing that you want to deal with.
Well, you want to cause a better future by using the data in the experiments.
Yeah. And so you look at the past because like this is because you want to know how things work. And so if you're just looking at the present, it's like that data is just not meaningful really, because you want to know how change exists over time, and then the present becomes meaningful. But yeah, like you're generally, I think, wanting to orient towards the future, because like which is like predictions, like that's what like the rationalist stuff we do.
So we're in one of my like major core theories, right? Cautiously when I say mine, the division of the past, the present, and the future. And this is one of the things that I use as a fundamental organizing tool of the mind. And mine's really like to, like, suddenly I'm having a memory flashback. I was chatting to Daniel, and I'm like over there in my memory, like thinking of a thing, right? And what's happened is I've moved from something in the present or in the conversation reminded me of that memory, and I'm over there in the memory, right? But there's one level to do that where I'm in it, and I'm like, Daniel's still talking, and then I'm like, oh, Daniel was saying a thing, I should pay attention, right? And then there's another level where I'm like, oh, I have moved to the past, or like even maybe just the moment after I come back, I was like, oh, I was in the past there. And so I was having an experience being very reminded of the past in that moment. It's really handy to be mindful of noticing when that happens and when you come out of it, because otherwise you build a story that looks something like Daniel said a thing, and then I'm reminded of this thing in the past, and then I'm back here because Daniel said a thing, and now I think Daniel's about to be mean to me because that thing in the past like just uniformly slot into my experience. And so instead of experiencing Daniel as the present version of himself, I've got the present version plus the past version like impacting on the present right now. But if I'm aware of when I switch away and switch back, then then there's still useful information, and if a bad thing happened, then I can anticipate. But I know on some level, I know that I wasn't here, I was back there, and now I'm here again.
And there's a reason why it reminded you.
Of course.
And that's
because there was something I needed to learn from the past or something. Hopefully.
And that's something and I think that's something to pay attention to as patterns, but that doesn't mean that it's true. Like, that doesn't mean that these patterns are the same just because they reminded you. But they might
be. The same goes for, like, Daniel says something and then a flashback to the past, and then the rest of it was suddenly I'm back here and I'm anticipating he's about to yell at me, right? And like I've projected into the future a negative thing, and so I'm not even in the present anymore, I'm in the future. And I'm not here. I'm dealing with where I think this is about to go. And chances are, if I think it's about to go bad, that influences it to go worse than if I think it's about to go good. Right? My anticipatory sense if it can point upwards, the more it can point upwards, the more often it can go from here to like, what's the best possible thing from here, as opposed to like, what's the worst possible thing from here, the more likely I am to create a better world.
I'm not saying that's not true, but I think the crux of this is like the distinguishments of what's going on. Like, one of these things is in your mind and one of these things is in reality. And there's a reason why those two frames are juxtaposed in this current moment. But you don't want to confuse. And I think that's the problem. Like when you confuse it and you just relive the old patterns, like that, you're reliving your karmic cycles. And you don't want to do that. You want to make choices and be free of
that. Right. This is to move into like vipassena philosophy. Vipassena? I don't know what the best way to pronounce this is, and someone's going to call me out. Vipassena.
I don't know. That's just
right. So Mr. Goenka created a meditative retreat, commonly known these days as a vipassena, something like that. It's probably pronounced differently in different parts of the world.
Vipassena. That's how we pronounce
it. You're developing your Australian accent there when you're saying vipassena.
Vipassena.
Australia has a lot of long letters and stretching. Anyway.
Long letters.
Australian accent. Amazing. You're just now more Canadian now. Never mind. Right. So part of his philosophy is the the one presented in these retreats. So they do 10-day silent retreats. They're often free by donation afterwards. After you do the retreat, you can donate for the benefit that you feel you've had. Donation is optional, but they don't let you give money beforehand unless you've done the work, which is kind of nifty. There's retreat centers all around the world. They're sort of self-sustaining.
Yeah.
Nifty little idea. But so their philosophy, if you...
We should do one of those. We should make a retreat center like that. Because they just have, it's a video, like it's a whole video thing. And then there's just people like maintaining it or like cooking and cleaning and stuff.
It's run by volunteers. There was, in the center that I went to, there was one paid worker who manages the thing and manages a bunch of volunteers who help out with manning the course for future people to concentrate and meditate, and also like maintenance and upkeep. So the place that I went to had a beautiful garden because it's like a meditation center. So garden, trees everywhere, like native plants. It was very simple accommodations because obviously you just sit and meditate all day, and then just a beautiful, beautiful location. Anyway, part of the philosophy of vipassana is that to scan your body, so move your attention through your whole body. It's a meditative technique, inch by inch. So you cover your whole body, you sort of scan inch by inch. It takes a while. By the time you put your attention somewhere, notice if there's a sensation, put your attention to the next place, notice if there's a sensation. But what you find when you do that is often that you have patterns in your body. And one example is like a pattern of tension. Let's say your shoulders are tight, right? And this pattern of tension you carry everywhere you go every day, and then it starts to influence your personality. And before you know it, you're responding to people in certain ways because you've got this tightness in your shoulders. And so when you go into Vipassana, you scan this part of your body, and you scan the whole body, and then you notice the patterns. And often there's like a negative emotional experience in them, or there's something. So as you scan them, you sort of validate them and bring them to peace naturally by scanning them. And then they relax. And then you're like, oh, I feel better now. And then the philosophy is, if you do that a lot, you will find your existing karma and you will expunge it and you will bring it to peace. And then when you walk through the world, instead of meeting every time you meet someone, you're like in this more defensive posture or whatever sort of posture it is, you'll be more peaceful. And so you will meet the better side of reality all the time.
Yeah.
Sometimes you will still encounter tensions and whatever, but you can work through them and sort of be as peaceful as possible.
You're letting go of all your like
your karma stuff.
But your stuck patterns.
So that's their philosophy. There's like a causal conclusion in there that I'm not sure that I'm certain that I agree with, in terms of the patterns and the effect you can have on your karmic pattern and that sort of thing. But like they've drawn the conclusion that sort of like a measure of agency over your sensations, and as in they have it, right? They have like it's complicated because they have to both be equanimous to everything, as in like just be present to it, and then also, and so like you have no agency, right? Just be equanimous to it. Sensations happen, and like they try and tell you to do stuff, but if you're just equanimous to everything, you'll be fine. And then they have so it gives you like a bit of powerlessness, and then they have a scan them and try and clear up your stuff, right? And so then it gives you a bunch of agency over it. And it feels like the way they presented it was sometimes disorganized. So they were giving you powerlessness in the wrong place and agency in the wrong place. And maybe that's just how I picked it up or something.
Yeah, I've never done that one. So I keep hearing about it.
It's definitely it's work, 10 days of meditating, 10 days of sitting, 10 days of you don't talk to anyone and you sit in your stuff. So if your brain, short story of my Vipassana retreat. So around about this time last year, I went on a 10-day retreat, and the food was just terrible. The food was like plain and bland and like, and along with that, it's very vivid because when you meditate and you're doing nothing else, everything, like the colors of the plants pop out, and like any flavor you taste is vivid. And so imagine tasting the most ordinary food you've had in ages, but like with vivid sensation, right? Like burnt toast, but like really vivid burnt toast. Wow, profoundly vivid burnt toast.
Is it like burnt toast, or is it like?
Oh, it's still burnt toast, but it was like full of sensation, full of like bright colors and flavors, but it was like, and I realized that obviously half of this is the mind being all like, this toast is burnt, this is terrible, this is ridiculous, how can they, and you know, that's there, and it makes you really have a bad time if you like spiral into it. At the same time, all of these sensate flavors were vivid and interesting because they were so strong, and so there's something interesting worth enjoying there, even though it was burnt toast. And by the end, like that was something I needed to work on and process and come to peace with, that even though it was burnt toast, I was finding it hilarious that they could burn toast 10 days in a row. And like, it brought me joy and fun to play with the way that my mind was messing with me about how annoying the burnt toast was. Mm-hmm. But it's stuff like that, you know. So I was all alone because you can't talk to anyone. And so I'm experiencing terrible burnt toast while very vividly feeling the flavors and deliciousness of toast in there.
That's
so,
cool.
so that's the type of thing that will happen on vipassana, depending on how much of your own crap you have in your head. Like, you know, you could walk around being like, that guy looks like he's really grumpy and mean, and that, you know, you can get caught up with what you don't talk to anyone, but you still see them. You can get caught up with like what's they're going through as well. Mm-hmm. And it's all in your head, right?
Not really what you're supposed to be. You're
not
supposed to be with your thoughts. You're supposed to be with your
right, with your meditation, with your mindfulness. That's right. But you still do it. Like, this is, you get caught up. You meet yourself. You know, this is in meditation. You meet yourself, particularly in the vipassana. They if you've got any rubbish, like, you know, I was complaining about the burnt toast, and then you meet yourself. And that was another one I found. So on the first day, I was like, oh, the bed's not very good. Oh, the cushions are not very comfortable. You know, it's an all right location, but it's a bit like not well kept because it's a bit of like the plants growing over, and then like, you know, oh, the food's not very good. And then by the afternoon of the first day, I was like, oh shit, I'm gonna have 10 days of this. I'm gonna have to stop that. Like, I'm gonna have to cut.
I had to listen to this douchebag complain for 10 days.
Right. I'm gonna have a really bad time if I spend 10 days complaining.
Yeah.
So I did. I stopped. Like the first afternoon, I was like, oh, have to cut it. And it came back a little bit. And I was like, nope, no complaining, because that's just causing greater negative experience, right? If it's like, oh, the plants are overgrown, like, who cares? You know, the food doesn't taste great. Like, who cares? 10 days, right? But if I spent all of that time humoring at myself, like, I would have had a horrible time. It would have been very suffering.
That's the worst. Like, listening to people complain all the time is the worst.
Right. And so that was something I had to learn, and I'm glad I learned it on the first day, sort of thing. But like, how much you complain at yourself. But this is the sorts of things you can learn on vipassana.
Yeah.
And it's not all good. Basically, I would say to anyone thinking about it, if you think you're friends with yourself, double check again, because there's probably like this. I didn't expect to encounter those ones, but basically, you will encounter stuff like that, and then you have to work out what to do with it. And, you know, some people talk themselves out of staying. It's only 10 days. And after 2 days, they're like, I'm out, I'm going home, you know?
Yeah, I can't handle it. Yeah.
Can't handle it because there's a lot there. So, you know, if you're going into this experience, you will encounter some of these things. So you need to be prepared, you need to be willing, you need to be curious and able to work through your stuff. So make sure you're ready. You only meet your own mind. So if you've got boogie monsters in your mind, you meet them. If you've got only happy thoughts in your mind, you'll meet them.
Yeah, you're kind of describing it like a trip.
It is, like, essentially, or people have trip-like experiences sometimes. So you can be prepared for a trip as well.
Yeah, like you gotta be like good.
I would say that it is on par with a acid trip in its like power to move, be fundamentally life-changing in how you feel about the world. Like it's sort of on par. It's 10 days, but it's like on par with an acid trip. There are other Like I would say holotropic breathwork can sometimes be on par as well. I'd say mushrooms can do that. I would say that really other types of meditations, like deeply getting into religions, can also have like.
Yeah, I've been on retreats that like I consider like a continuation of like my shroom trip. It was like my third shroom trip. I didn't take any shrooms, but I went on a retreat, and I kind of like I kind of closed that container for me.
Mhm. Cool.
Yeah, I've done
There are like,
I've done a silent retreat. Like my wife and I did a silent retreat.
oh,
Like
how-
we're just one day.
mm,
We went camping, and then we're in just silence. And that was really interesting. Huh?
was it nice?
Yeah. There's definitely like there's definitely for me for these things, there's always like it's like fine, and then there's like this like fight at some point where it's like and then it's like and then there's like okay, and then it like kind of goes back to equilibrium.
Mhm.
And that's really that like that like struggle, like that internal struggle is really like there's something like peaceful about the resolution. Because it's like fighting myself. Like at first I'm like, okay, I'm trying this thing and it's like fun, and then it gets to the point where it's like it's not fun anymore.
Mhm.
And then there's choices to be made, because like you could just not do it, right? Like there's no one forcing me to do it. I could just talk, but it was like, okay, well, am I going to? Am I the kind of person that can't do this? And because I did decide to do it, and now I can decide not to do it. But then that means that like my longevity of decision making is not real.
I would say that like there's a whole bucket of these life-changing experiences. Like Tony Robbins is hailed as one of those like big life-changing landmark vipassena. Like there's a whole bunch of them. There's like a list, like psychedelics or like acid trip, major acid trip. I would sort of like encourage people to do at least one, have at least one of these life-changing phenomena, maybe even more than one.
Like regularly.
Um,
Like at least
not everyone needs them regularly, but I would say that it would be valuable for everyone to have had at least one life-changing.
No, you got to do them it should be like at least twice a year. You're doing something
That seems like a lot. The one thing about psychedelics is it disorganizes, and not everyone needs more disorganizing.
I'm not saying do drugs, try it twice a year, but like doing something that's beyond your current life experience. So like, yeah, like a vipassana, like that one's like a big one. And maybe that will last like a while, but like even like, yeah, like doing a silent retreat or not doing any internet or something for a day where you like feel that struggle.
Yeah, I would say do a month of content free seems to, or like a dopamine detox seems like a good practice.
Yeah, like doing something where you hit this hump where you're like, oh shit, I really don't want to do this, but also I do.
Well, we have a friend who talks about ice baths or like hot cold swapping. So sauna, ice bath, sauna, ice bath.
Yeah, like something intense, like doing something intense like that. Yeah. Yeah, like it doesn't. I'm not saying do drugs multiple times a year. Right? Like that's the thing. Like some people would want to do this, some people don't. But like you should be doing something that's taking you outside your comfort zone in like a unique way. It should be more like you should be doing it every quarter, I think.
I want to be cautious about this because my perception of a lot of people is that they seem to be on their edge. Like they're already stretched very thin. They're already like hardly keeping up with the payments and the energy and the attention and the stress and the
You gotta redo that. Like you shouldn't be living every day on like I'm not saying don't live on the edge. I'm saying you don't live where like you're stretched thin, because then you have a thin existence.
right. So I see a lot of people stretch thin already. So to suggest here just have an extra life-changing thing on a stretched thin person, I wouldn't recommend it.
No.
I recommend those persons to like get some safety,
No,
get some space.
you gotta. Yeah, people are like elastic bands. You don't want to be stretched out all the way, but you want to be like within your normal tolerance, and then every once in a while you go to the edge of your tolerance, a little bit past where you thought you could.
Right. I can agree with that. But you want to take yourself to the challenge when you're ready for it. You don't want to challenge yourself before you're comfortable.
Yeah. Like, and you don't want, like, you can do vipassana and you're like, well, how am I going to make rent, or my kids are sick and this and that, like all these things. Like, oh, I'll just take off 10 days and do vipassana. Like, no, don't do that. Like, you could take 10 days to like get your life to a better equilibrium. Yeah, like, I mean, I think some people like it's the other way, where they do vacation, like they're stretched all the time, and they do vacations where they unstretch. And I think like you want to live a meaningful life, and that's going to mean like putting in effort and work and stuff, and like you're going to be doing things, and you kind of want to be somewhere around capacity for most of your life. But yeah, you need to come back and down. Like you need to, like, I think that's a lot of good meditation does, like sit and do nothing. And like, what's that, right? Which for a lot of people that is pushing them past what they're able to do, because they have to, like you said, they have to sit with their thoughts, or they have to sit with themselves. But that's like your baseline, and you want that baseline to be like clean, nice.
Good, healthy, happy, like, well.
Yeah, and that requires you, for most people, like obviously exceptions, but for most people that requires them moving to baseline and like noticing what's going on and cleaning up anything that needs to be cleaned up there. And I found for me that was like the biggest gains, where it's like the smallest gains, because I'm sitting doing nothing and can't exactly boast about like
oh yeah,
did nothing for 15 minutes today. It was really good. Like, be proud of me, right? Like, nobody's gonna really give you credit for that. But that's huge, because now nothing is fine. And for a lot of people, nothing's not fine.
Right.
And so there's always something happening with them, and so they can never like orient. They can never work, and they can never, because they can't, because the second there's nothing that needs to be filled. And I'm not saying nothing is something, but it's space, and it's the potential for something. It's future something. And yeah, you don't want to be at max. When you're working out, you don't want your muscles being at max all the time. Sometimes you need to do nothing, so that when you hit that heavy weight, you can lift it. Psychotechnologies live.
Psychotechnologies live. It's a little premature, but like, yeah, that's a good place to end, I think.